In our top story this hour, U.S. President Donald Trump's campaign has called for a recount in Wisconsin. The Trump campaign filed lawsuits to stop vote counting in Michigan and Pennsylvania. They've also asked a judge in Georgia to order late arriving ballots to be separated and secured so that they cannot be counted. Democrat Joe Biden took a huge step to capture the White House with wins in Michigan and Wisconsin, bringing him close to a majority. As the international community awaits the outcome of the U.S. presidential election, Schiff Berman, a professor at the George Washington University School of Law, says democracy hangs in the balance. He says the peaceful transfer of power must be ensured. Biden stands on the brink of claiming the presidency, with a handful of states expecting to complete their vote counts. AP and Fox News have called Arizona for Biden, taking him to 264 electoral college votes out of the 270 that are needed to win the White House, whilst other networks still have Biden at 253. Trump is at 214. Biden needs only to win an additional outstanding state such as Nevada, where he's leading, or Georgia, where his campaign believes that absentee votes will push him over the top. Trump's campaign has launched legal proceedings, as we said a little earlier. For the latest now, we're joined by correspondent Sherwin Bryce-Pease. A very good afternoon to you, Sherwin. So just before we get to the nitty-gritties of the developments that transpired throughout the day, let's just talk to you about where we're sitting now. How are we looking, who's leading, and what's left to be counted now?
That was such a comprehensive intro, Palesa. You almost don't need me to provide any further analysis. Really a great introduction there. Let's talk about where we find ourselves in the race, right? The winning number is 270. Joe Biden finds himself at 264. Let's explain that 264. The state of Arizona, we've made that a different blue color to the other states that have gone Biden's way because the Associated Press and Fox News have called that state for Biden with its 11 electoral college votes. It's the first time that state would go for a Democratic presidential nominee since Bill Clinton won the state in 1996. But a number of other news organizations, including CNN, the New York Times, and others, have yet to call Arizona. So they're putting Biden at 253 instead of 264. But we've included the AP and Fox determination. Of course, the president is at 214, so which means he needs to clean up in all these white areas. All the white areas on this board, that becomes extremely critical for the president were he to achieve the required number of 270 electoral college votes. What's interesting about the Georgias and the North Carolinas and the Pennsylvanias of these United States is that they are still counting those absentee and mail-in ballots. And where are those ballots coming from? They're coming from places like Atlanta, Georgia, which is heavily Democratic. They're coming from places like Philadelphia in Pennsylvania, which is also heavily Democratic, and larger cities with more populations, which mean more ballots. And what have the Biden and the Democratic campaigns done in this election? They've encouraged their voters, Palesa, to vote through this format. Why? Because there's a coronavirus pandemic. There is a public health emergency in the United States. Overnight, for the first time in the United States, confirmation that the number of daily infections exceeded 100,000 for the first time. So that was the message from the Biden campaign. Vote by mail, vote absentee ballots. It's safe. It's safer for your health. It safeguards the health of others. And so we are now seeing a surge from Democratic votes in terms of those mail-in ballots that are being tabulated. Trump currently has in Georgia a 49.6%, Biden at 49.2%, a difference of a mere 20,000 votes, with over 100,000 plus votes still to be tabulated. In North Carolina, there's a difference of 75,000 votes. The difference 50%, 48% with Trump in the lead. In Pennsylvania, Trump's lead, he had 600,000 lead yesterday. That has come down to 160,000. So that just tells you how support is coming coming in for Biden in terms of those absentee and mail-in ballots over there. And of course, if we are still to discuss Arizona, there's a slim lead that Biden enjoys there of about 69,000 votes. We've just seen a number that about 450,000 votes are still due to come in there. So things could change there. But Fox News and AP are quite adamant that their call is going to stand. They are not going to retract it. They believe the former vice president has a built-in advantage there in terms of where those votes will be coming from in Arizona. And of course, if Arizona stands, all Biden then needs, if that number stands, are the 6 electoral college votes in Nevada. And we are told in Nevada, the votes outstanding are going to come from places like Las Vegas, from places like Reno, counties that are heavily Democratic, that are heavily unionized. So advantage Biden in Nevada, that gets him to 270. And Palesa, that means you're the next president of the United States.
Of course, that does not sit well with President Donald Trump. He tweeted just after 4 p.m. saying that stop the count. We know that, of course, that they filed lawsuits to stop vote counting in Michigan and Pennsylvania. Let's just talk about that, Sherwin.
So let me tell you what that means. If you stop the count for everywhere, Biden is in the lead in Arizona and Biden is in the lead in Nevada. If you stop the count, Biden wins based on the tallies in those states.
Well,
what the president is actually referring to are stopping the counts here, where he is now losing ground very rapidly as those mail-in ballots are being tabulated. He doesn't want Georgia to go. If he loses Georgia, there's no path to the White House. If he loses Pennsylvania, as is looking increasingly likely, not definitive yet, but if the returns as we expect and this trajectory that we've seen over the last 24 hours, that 600,000 gap that the president had has come down to 160,000, and there's still hundreds of thousands of ballots that are due to be counted. And so what you've seen from the Trump campaign are lawsuits. When did those lawsuits appear? When this blue wall was established here. Minnesota went first, then Wisconsin went, and then Michigan. And so resurrecting did Biden the blue wall that Hillary Clinton lost in the Midwest. And so the president's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, accompanied by one of the president's sons, Eric Trump, in Pennsylvania, filing lawsuit. This was Eric Trump yesterday speaking outside one of the polling stations there.
The Democrats know that the only way that they could win this election is to cheat in Pennsylvania. And we've seen it from day one. We found ballots in drainage ditches. They're not letting our poll watchers watch the polls. They're not letting them inside. There's video after video of them passing out collateral material in polling sites all over Philadelphia. They're trying to cheat. Guys, this is fraud. This is absolute fraud. We've seen it in Philadelphia before. They're trying to make a mockery of the election of this country.
Officials, of course, in Pennsylvania, Palesa, are disputing that it's fraud. They have bipartisan representation in those counting places, Republicans, Democrats, and video cameras. The media is allowed in those places. So to cast aspersions post the election as you see your numbers trailing in certain states. And, of course, the build up to this election. I mean, that has been the mantra of Donald Trump at his campaign rallies on social media, that these mail-in ballots are going to favor Democrats. That's the perception, and therefore didn't want those ballots to be counted. And so they've appealed even to the Supreme Court in Washington to overrule a Supreme Court ruling in the state of Pennsylvania that extended the ballot deadline by 3 days in the state of Pennsylvania. And so ballots that arrive 3 days after November 3rd are, in terms of Pennsylvania law, allowed to be counted. We also heard from the Pennsylvania governor, a Democrat, Tom Wolf. This is what he had to say.
We may not know the results even today, but the most important thing is that we have accurate results. Again, even if that takes a little longer than we're used to. Make no mistake, our democracy is being tested in this election. This is a stress test of the ideals upon which this country was founded. And the basic rule of one person, one vote, that still carries, and it has to carry here. I will vigorously, and we all will vigorously defend against any attempt to attack that vote in Pennsylvania.
So as these numbers start to solidify, Palesa, we expect more lawsuits from the Trump campaign. So far, we have them filing suit in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, and of course, as you correctly pointed out, they are calling for a recount in the state of Wisconsin. There's an observer mission on the ground in the United States from the Organization for Security and Cooperation of Europe. This is what they said. Donald Trump has tarnished this election with claims of fraud, allegations. These allegations have undermined the trust in democracy. Tuesday's vote was both competitive and well managed, Palesa.
Indeed. So we're reading now, Sherwin, that Fox News is apparently reporting that the National Intelligence Chief will today hold a media briefing that 10 votes in Nevada were cast by people who no longer live there. Do you know anything regarding that particular media briefing?
Look, there are so many claims about voter fraud. Eric Trump yesterday at that press conference, Palesa, was also talking about, ballots being found in a ditch. Let them investigate. Let us see if there's any credibility to these claims. Remember, this is a campaign now that is essentially feels that it's losing. And so one has to question the motives here. I mean, if the president is losing, as the argument goes, they're going to try and they're trying to litigate this election result in the courts. There are many allegations around this country, but this is the process that has been underway. Each and every state in this country has different electoral laws, and the Republican Party and the Democratic Party are very involved in the tabulation of votes. I'll give you one example. There's a organization called the New York Board of Elections in the United States. We've interviewed their leaders, and their two leaders at the top. One is a Republican and one is a Democrat, and they move from polling place to polling place together. They make decisions together so that there are no questions raised about the legitimacy of this election. And what Donald Trump is doing is undermining one of the pillars of American democracy by crying foul, by calling fraud without any real evidence. But look, the courts will weigh in here. The courts will weigh in and they will decide as to what is real and what is fiction, Palesa.
Yeah, I'm looking at the response from Donald Trump's tweet. A lot of people there responding saying that vote rigging did indeed happen. Are we likely to say that that's the overall sense of how the Americans are feeling right now, or is it just a group of people at a particular corner?
This is a very anxious time in the United States. I mean, even to the build-up, we interviewed experts about, warning us that newsrooms should be prepared for this election to go off the rails. There's been speculation for months leading up to this election that were Donald Trump to lose, that he was not going to go quietly. It is not in the Donald Trump vein to do so. He is going to fight for this second term, come hell or high water. That has been built into this strategy here in the United States. So it's no surprise that the president, who has sought to justify his popularity in this election by the display of hundreds of people turning out at his campaign rallies, he points to those rallies. That was the comparison with what was happening at the Biden rallies, right? You see Joe Biden have these socially distanced events which the president would mock. He would mock the president, the former vice president wearing a mask. He would see Biden at these drive-in rallies where people were allowed to stay in their cars, while the president essentially had what many public health experts warned were likely super spreader events in terms of the coronavirus pandemic that has devastated large parts of this country and killed over 230,000 Americans. So the president points to those large crowds, and there's no doubting that Donald Trump has had excellent support in this election. He is not that far off in terms of getting to 270. If he cleans up the rest of these white states, he's going to get to 270. And I think that's what's so divisive in this country. You've come close. Hillary Clinton also came close in 2016. And Trump supporters will feel that the president has come close here, and that's, based on what senior officials in the Trump campaign is saying, including the president, about fraud and about how his support is being undermined by ballots that are coming from nowhere. I mean, this kind of stuff resonates with your supporters. And so you're seeing outside counting stations in places like Arizona. There are people protesting outside. There have been prayer groups outside. A lot of people in this country want Donald Trump to win. The question, Palesa, is, does he have the numbers to get to 270? And that right now is what's in doubt.
And when are we likely to know if he does indeed have the numbers shown? As you say, that anxiety levels are rising, not just there in America, but I suppose all over the world. When are we likely to see the final results?
Now, that's a question for someone with a crystal ball, right? I mean, normally we get results on the night of election, maybe early the next morning. Yeah. We're in different territory here. This is the pandemic this is the pandemic election. People are counting in these counting stations, socially distanced. The way people had to vote was socially distanced, 6 feet apart. It slowed everything down. This is just a different ball game. It's part of, I suppose we can call it the 2020 election, based on everything that's gone on. We don't know if we're going to get a result today or possibly by tomorrow. It depends on what happens. Nevada has indicated that they could release some important data by noon today, noon our time, I think. So that's going to be early evening, later evening in South Africa. So if Nevada comes through and Biden starts extending his lead and one of the networks confirm what the AP and Fox News have done, we could then have a result today. It's easier for Biden to get to 270. That if he gets to 270 first, then it's much shorter. But if Trump starts winning important key states here, we might be seeing this go to the weekend.
All right, so the waiting continues. Thank you so much for that update. Our U.S. correspondent there, Sherwin Bryce-Pease.